Hello, folks. Welcome to the show. I am, as ever, Alistair, your avuncular host, and we are utterly delighted to have a very, very special guest with us this week. But first off, welcome all of you. I'm aware there are folks here from the Isle of Man, some of you who may have been there when I was there, in which case you'll know about how this time of year tends to work for us. Some of you from York, some of you from Magnus Archives and Rusty Quill, some of you from Pseudopod, some of you who are just here for the Chungus. And trust me, what Chungus we have for you this week. The way this works is really simple. We have a three-stage show. The opening is an opening monologue, which is essentially a chance for you to get situated, get comfortable, make sure you're hydrated, you got a snack, your pets are fed, any meds you need to take. And then, in the middle of the show, I will be talking to the fantastic Mr. Jonathan Sims of the Magnus Archives about his upcoming horror debut, 13 Stories, which releases, I believe, tomorrow. Then, after that, we will have a little bit of Shenanigans-related content, and then we'll sign off. So, without further ado, it gives me great pleasure to hand the mic over to Mr. Jonathan Sims himself, who is doing this week's opening monologue, My Event Horizon Fever Dream, by me.
My Event Horizon Fever Dream, by Alistair Stewart. It takes a certain type of moxie to successfully land a haunted house that's a spaceship as a concept. It takes even more to attract a cast including Lawrence Fishburne, Sam Neill, Jolie Richardson, Joan Allen, Jack Noseworthy, king of names, Jason Isaacs, and Sean Pertwee, making it an actual, legitimately good movie that uses the orbital's Satan as its final jump scare takes the sort of moxie that makes George Clooney nod appreciatively down the bar of the casino at you, even as Sandra Bullock and Cate Blanchett are taking your contact details for their next job. Event Horizon, written and directed by Paul Anderson, has that moxie. The Lewis and Clark is a deep-range search and rescue vessel. Someone drops the ball, they get the call, off at a gallop to save some lives. But the Event Horizon, a test bed for the world's first interstellar drive, has just reappeared after a decade away, and Dr. Weir, the ship's designer, wants answers. Spoiler! All those answers involve horrible things. I love Event Horizon. It's a big gore-soaked puppy of a movie that folds my favourite horror tropes. Hi, I'll be your villain this evening, and I've translated the Latin and it says we're fucked, and throws them into my favourite setting. Plus, it does so with no subtle at all. The Event Horizon's interior looks like a cathedral had blackout sex with an Iron Maiden album cover. The drive itself looks like Pinhead's stress toy. This is clearly the bad place, which makes watching this likeable crew of assholes be slowly but surely destroyed by it both all the more horrifying and all the more entertaining. Now, word comes to us that Event Horizon is about to be adapted for TV by Amazon under the control of Adam Wingard. Wingard is the horror director with a grounded but unflinching eye, and his The Guest is one of my all-time favourite movies. Seriously, it is built like nothing on earth and so much fun. He's doing the work for Amazon because eventually we all will, and that's not good. But hey, at least this way it won't get cancelled 2 to 3 seasons in for featuring women, gay people, and non-Caucasians, right? Netflix. But here's the thing. I want, very badly, this to be one of those shows people don't see coming. And with the benefit of an unlimited budget and not having a job, here's how I do it. Lie. For 2 seasons. Have 2 full seasons of the Lewis and Clark going on adventures. Space rescue adventures. Have Miller defy orders to drop them into a Martian dust storm and rescue a crew trapped on a satellite. Have Stark be offered the big chair on the Finds and turn it down because she realizes she likes being on the Clark more. Follow Coop as the ship rescue technician finds himself working a job in the lunar habitat he grew up in. Show us the horrific trauma that led to DJ becoming the mumbling, quiet, reserved, and furious man he is. Have the Clark be the only ship available to rescue Smitty's old posting, including the commanding officer that he transferred to SNR to escape. Full space casualty, maximum Skytruck. You know it makes sense. And it does. Throw a top-notch cast in there. I'm seeing Aldous Hodge as Miller, Lauren Cohen as Stark, Tony Kebbell as Smitty for a start, and let them work and let the audience invest in the show's fundamentally reassuring aesthetic and hard world. The simple, brutal, and fun drudgery of working SNR in a busy solar system. Make us care about these characters. Show us how they became who they are. And then, send them to hell. Play the movie out exactly as it was on screen. pick them off one by one and make sure it all hurts. Have evil not only assault the sanity of Dr. Weir, but the very shape of the show itself. Curdle space casualty into space casualties. End the show, break the toys, drop the mic, and cue the music. Or at least that's what I'd do. Event Horizon is in development at Amazon now, and you can bet I'm looking forward to what they do.
I'm just going to have you read everything I write from now on, because that sounded great. Thank you. Hi, Johnny. How are you?
Hello, I'm very well. I'm very well. Very excited to talk about Event Horizon, which I assume is why I was brought on, because as soon as I read this, I'm like, I fucking love that movie.
It's so good. It's so good.
It's a weird one because it's clearly quite rushed, and like apparently the actual production was really rushed, but like there's so much division I've seen between like the people who love it tend to be the people who like kind of see where it's playing, and like the fact that like this is it's a really hard sort of horror to land, and it does it really well. And it's just nice to see people being competent in a horror movie.
I think that's actually the core of why I love it. That these are all highly trained professionals who are completely unflappable, who just get completely flapped. Get flapped to death in a wide variety of ways.
Lawrence Fishburne makes the call, we're getting out of here at the exact correct moment. Like, up until then, it's like, ooh, bit ominous, but fundamentally nothing untoward. Not an excuse to scrub the mission. As soon as he's like, I see what happened. We're leaving now. And like, it's too late. That's not, like, he made the right call. It's just, it happened to be too late.
He literally mashes the screw this white nonsense button. And it does nothing. And it's so good. I'm very, very fond of it. If nothing else, for that final jump scare. Because I am incredibly susceptible to a good jump scare. I'm even more susceptible to a really bad one. And Event Horizon actually has both. The moment where the highly trained rescue technician is terrified by a glove in 0G on his shoulder. Or you're just like... What? And that followed by just Satan crashing into that final scene. It's just... It is...
Like, and it's like it's also it has a few unearned jump scares, I'd say, but it's got plenty of earned ones as well. And like I always feel that like I don't want to dismiss the jump scare as because like it is if it lands, it's good, but like you got to earn it, and I think the movie does. Also apparently, so the flashes, like the single frames of like, oh, the hell suffering.
I have an arm in my mouth kind of thing, yeah.
Yeah, apparently they shot like a full 2 minutes, and edited a full 2 minute, like, grotesque blood, death, sex orgy. And that cut exists on like a single VHS in like some film technician's house who doesn't have a VHS player.
It must be ours.
I sense a heist, Johnny. I really do.
How do we get our hands on that?
Even if it's
I'm obviously not game on a recorded medium, but
no, of course. But we'll talk. Possibly
on the stream.
Possibly in a park by a lake feeding ducks.
Lawyer says do not discuss on stream. Exactly.
Moving swiftly on. So you wrote a really good book.
Oh, thank you.
Yes.
I tried.
You succeeded. Tell us a little about your book.
So 13 Stories is a sort of I think the word that most of the reviews have used is a portmanteau novel, but it's sort of halfway between anthology and full novel. It is set in Banyan Court, a luxury high-rise in the heart of Whitechapel, which is, I don't know if you're aware of, certain boroughs in London have a rule that if you are building a luxury accommodation, you have to set a certain portion aside as affordable housing. But what that almost always means is because there aren't actually the additional regulations to like back up what that means. Thank you, Tory government. The affordable housing tends to be like very cut corners, very like much lower quality building materials, all this sort of stuff. So 13 Stories is the idea of this sort of very kind of the epitome of this sort of very divided. You've got the front half, which is shiny and new and has a health suite for all the executives and digital startup CEOs who live there, and the back half is sort of run down and uses a lot more of the old, like the original old bricks from the tenement that it grew out of.
Mm-hmm.
And at the top is Tobias Fell, sinister and, spoiler alert, dead billionaire. And he dies at a dinner party attended by 12 other people. And each chapter even, is their story. So each one is a sort of small, largely self-contained little ghost story that culminates in this grotesque climax of dinner party death.
Fantastic.
And yeah, it was a weird one to write, because it was like it's my first novel, but at the same time it held just close enough to like the sort of short story roots of something like Magnus, the Magnus Archives, the podcast, that it felt like it was quite comfortable, actually, like almost a lot more comfortable than I expected, because it felt like a natural stepping stone, if that makes sense.
It does. That's actually something that really struck me reading it. That this feels like you trying new things with some tools which are familiar to you and using them in new ways, which was really cool and worked really nicely.
Yeah, it was actually. I can't take full credit for like the original seed from which the book grew, or indeed the title, because my editor at Glance, Rachel, we've been discussing various book projects, and she said, "Oh, we've got one that we like, I'd very much like to get written." And she sort of laid out in very broad strokes the idea of like haunted tower block, and the title of 13 stories. And she was like, "Oh, but obviously, if you can come up with a better title, that's fine." I'm like, "I cannot come up with a better title. That is a fantastic title." And she was like, "Yeah, no, we're looking at sort of individual stories that kind of knit together for a single climax, ideally with an audio focus. Do you think that's do you think that's in your wheelhouse?" And I was like, "Yeah, no,
let me think about that.
I can probably pull that one out."
I'll try. I'll see how well it goes.
Yeah, so to a certain degree, like I feel a bit bad, because it does feel like being sort of handed and said, hey, do you want to write a novel on easy mode?
There's no such thing. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, I mean, like as I've rapidly discovered, that's not actually that's not a thing. That's but yeah,
fantastic. So a couple of things really leapt out at me as I was reading it, and I wanted to chat to you about them. And also, we have some really good questions from the audience already. I think my big thing was, what did you find? This is a slightly loaded question, because obviously Magnus is very long form. What did you find fun about working long form in novel? Was there something? Did it enable you to do things you haven't done before?
Yeah, no, like I felt that it was interesting, because I had the space to dive a bit deeper without things needing to be grand, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. Like with Magnus, with sort of very long form stuff, I feel like I can get really deep on certain themes, but that depth, that sort of exploration needs to take place over the course of like several seasons, like building on it sort of a bit of an episode by a bit of an episode. Whereas in this case, I felt like I had much more of a space to go as deep as I wanted right off the bat. There wasn't a need to be weaving this grand mystery. It was much more self-contained, which I felt actually it gives you kind of a lot more freedom in a lot of ways, especially and I mean, I tell you that the thing that the biggest difference is I could go back, like if I had a thought in chapter 12, I could go back to chapter 1 and just completely redo it. Which, in an ongoing podcast, if in episode like 153, you're like, oh, that would have been a really good idea. Can I get... Oh, no, because episode 18's on the wiki, and that would contradict it very directly. And sometimes you do it anyway, but, you know...
it's okay, no one's listening.
Being able to work with the text as a whole is a very different experience.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of that, actually. The fact that stuff that occurs to you as time goes on ends up influencing how the novel opens and so on. That's really cool.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where, like, with the podcast, so much of the early stuff you have to leave things open. You have to leave hooks, like, so that because you know that later on you're going to need to be tying things together, but you're not 100% sure of the shape of things in the future. So, like, you've got to be at least a little bit non-committal in the early stages of something really long form. Whereas with this, because you ultimately you have a whole you can work on as an entire text. You can be a lot more. You can get into it right from the start.
The other thing which kind of really jumped out at me is it feels very London, and it feels very London in kind of both a locational way and a very kind of socio-political way. And the point that you open with about how, you know, these tower blocks have to have affordable housing and also have the yuppie hives in them. I'm really curious as to what kind of research you came across as you were digging into that, and whether there was anything that didn't make it in.
Yes, and like a lot of, I feel like a lot of the London stuff comes from, just having lived in London for like better part of a decade now. And like most of the, I feel like most of the kind of emotional palette I use to talk about London is very much like coming from me and my own experiences and my own sort of relationship to this huge, weird, distended mess of a city. I love history research. I love like looking into just picking a thing and kind of diving down into it. And it was, I think, like most of the research that I did was on Whitechapel itself, because that's the area I wanted it set. Because I wanted it to be in, central London, but to still have that specific sort of gentrifying socio-political place.
I get you.
I was about to say that there's all sorts of there is a chapter where one of the characters has some difficulty researching the history of Whitechapel without just constantly stumbling across just gratuitous shit about Jack the Ripper, and that's very that is very much drawn from life, because it is an area whose history is dominated by just one fucking dickhead, and it's like just but I can't offhand think of like I love research, but I'm so bad at like keeping it in my head. I'll dive super deep down a rabbit hole and I'll be like, oh, that's a fantastic fact. That one's going in, and it'll be like, what else did you read in the last 4 hours? I have this fact.
It's a fact. It's shiny.
So I can't offhand think of like a lot of specific like London information, but yeah, so much of it is just you live and you rent specifically in London for a decade, and there's also like I weirdly working night shift for like a couple of years right when I first moved up here it shows you such a completely different side of a city to see it constantly at night. Just sort of all the different, because there's so much of the city that you don't normally see during the day. And I don't specifically mean like all the nightlife or the dark side. I mean like the market stall folks who are out at like 3 a.m. Setting up, or like, you know, you'll because we used to work 7 days on, 7 days off, and so on 6 o'clock on a Monday morning we'd go down the only pub that was open at 6 a.m. because it catered to these markets, and you just watch people sort of trundling into work, and it's yeah. Sorry, I've lost my train of thought. But yeah, it's okay. There's a lot of London, and you know, a lot of me in the book, I think.
That very much comes across, and it feels unique. It feels very distinct in kind of tone and approach. And because I'm an enormous structural nerd, I'm incredibly curious about how well mapped out this was, because the way that you lay out characters who are glimpsed in the background early on and then become central later, and how consequences echo around one another. How much of that was organic and how much of that was intricate plotting?
Well, it was all three to different degrees. So I'm very much a structuralist. So like, to start with, I went through and like plotted out who I saw as like the linchpin characters who were constantly getting up in other people's stories, and like which characters had like a bit of overlap, which were the like important characters who didn't have their own chapters but would be cropping up in other ones. And like somewhere on a hard drive somewhere, there's still like the actual text document of that original like sort of web, I guess, of connections. Then I sort of talked it through with Rachel, who was coming at it much more from a how we wanted each chapter to feel, like the idea that each chapter has echoes of a slightly different sort of horror story, like the tech CEO. We wanted to have a sort of a kind of a Black Mirror vibe. There's one that we wanted to sort of go into like kind of conspiracy theory horror. Some that like have a much more of a
Tech asshole.
like an old school cursed object sort of vibe.
Yeah.
And so we discussed that, and like that became a sort of a different sort of like structure that we sort of ended up marrying the two. And then over the course of editing, a lot of that sort of would get changed because I'd get notes back saying like, okay, this is good, but we need more Damien. Like Damien needs to feel like he's threaded through a lot more of this story. And I'd be like, okay, so that he can go there, which means that this one probably needs to be a different character. And then there was also the fact that like, as I was writing it, it became clear certain characters worked with other characters quite well. And like, weirdly, it not to get all sort of writing, but it's like certain characters were like felt like they were making friends through the writing process.
I get that. And
so then there was like aspects of like, okay, we'll go back through those chapters and like, emphasize that a bit, because like these characters want to be friends. They want to have more of a connection. So, go back and put that in. So it was very much like you have a blueprint, and as you're writing it, you are adjusting and just hammering all the dents out that you didn't notice when you were actually potting it.
So what you're saying is there isn't a room with about a mile of red thread and a crazy person board.
Liv, I cannot emphasize enough how much I rent in London. I do not have a wall to put red thread on.
How long did the writing process?
How much space do you think I have?
How long did it take from start to finish to get them?
Oh God, that's a really difficult question, because it was at one point being sort of workshopped and tweaked alongside a couple of other book ideas. I would say 13 Stories specifically was locked in place, and I started actually writing it maybe a year and a half ago.
Cool.
Possibly a bit close to 2 years.
Also, while I remember, Needs More Damien is possibly the best editorial note any horror novel could receive. Could we Damien this up a little bit?
I'm very, very fond of Damien. Like, I always find that I end up like giving different characters just like a specific part of myself, and I'll just be like, okay, well, you will have how I look at a cityscape. You will have, and Damien is very much like, you have a softness for 70s prog rock, which just endears him to me massively.
I was very fond of Damien. I was very fond of Yannick. Yannick's just kind of
Yannick
shit kind of response is very endearing.
Yannick. So Sash was reading it through, and there's a bit where like Yannick sort of effectively talks through his theory about like how fundamentally all rich people are in many ways like actually very stupid, and Sash sort of just looked up and was like, "This is what you think, isn't it?" I was like, a little bit.
There's a reason they call it bleeding on the page, isn't it?
Exactly. There's one particular thing I really wanted to talk to you about because it's taken me a little while to figure out what impressed me the most, and it's this. You weaponize ambiguity in this novel in a really interesting way, where an awful lot of horror fiction gives you the reassuring kind of hand, not claw, wrapped around yours of something weird is happening, and it's okay because you can see it too. And there are 2 or 3 instances in this, and I think it's actually how Yannick ends up being folded in, where there is something very odd happening, which is very clearly being perceived by one character, and no one else can see it. And you don't describe it, or you describe it in the loosest terms possible. And it is profoundly unsettling, because it's like you lay out the rules and you go, these don't apply. And I wanted to give you a chance to talk about that, maybe.
Well, I think as with, I mean, any conversation I have about horror, a lot of it for me comes back to M.R. James, who's very much my education and remains very much my sort of role model, I guess, in terms of ghost stories and in terms of horror. And like the lesson to me from M.R. James is that perspective is the absolute most important tool in a horror writer's arsenal. Who, not just what is being seen, but who is seeing it. Because the perspective of the person being haunted and the perspective of the person watching someone being haunted are completely different.
Yeah.
And the perspective of the person being haunted is not necessarily the scarier of the two. I think one of my favorite M.R. James stories is called A School Story, and it is just it's just 2 people talking about like reminiscing over their school days, and one of them is like, oh, there's a slightly weird thing that happened in my school, and he narrates 4 events that he was sort of semi-present for. He was not involved in the horror story at all. It's just these sort of snippets of a horror story clearly happening to someone else, and like the spaces in between that allow this perspective and like the weird sort of third-hand perspective to actually be in many ways more horrific than if you knew exactly what was happening. And I think to me, the idea of a haunting specifically, but a lot of horror stories is an intensely personal thing. So it's very important that while aspects of a haunting can bleed over, I always think it's very important that no one can share your haunting. If somebody is watching you get haunted, they are watching you get haunted. And yeah, maybe they'll see a shadow, or maybe maybe they will see the haunting, but they won't actually know what they're looking at. It'll just look completely normal to them. And that idea of the watching someone get haunted is focused on the person rather than the haunting itself, I think is very important for creating that space.
Yeah, and your point, your description of it as a third perspective is, I think, the best possible way to describe it. Because, again, going back to school stories, and this is one of those moments where I'm always a little reluctant to go, the best possible thing we can do with horror is study the past. But the best possible thing we can do with horror in this instance is actually study the past a bit. With school stories, that captures so perfectly that thing which almost everyone I know had growing up, where there are the weird things that happen that you just kind of shake off and go, yeah, that was Wednesday. I had geography after it. And it's always this, the way I always think of it is, it's the thing that moves through the herd at the watering hole, and you don't see it, but you see the herd move to get out of the way. It's the lobstrosity at the end of the mist. It doesn't see you. It can't see you. But you can see enough of it to know there is something that you don't want to see all of.
Yeah.
I love
something
that.
bad has passed by here.
Exactly.
Yeah. And in terms of the past, I think it is a mistake to idolize the past. But especially the past works in fiction and, in a lot of horror fiction especially.
Yeah.
But I think it is, I think there is still, I think there's an awful lot to learn from the work, like the horror of past, the horror of the past, both in terms of things, in terms of learning what to do and learning what not to do. And it's also just a fascinating thing because the things that fundamentally, while a lot of the things M.R. James was scared of still resonate, a lot of them don't. Like horror and what you are scared of is born out of who you are and the society in which you live and the position you occupy within that society. M.R. James specifically occupied an incredibly comfortable position.
Exactly.
In a society that was incredibly comfortable for him. So I think it's important to I think it's important to look back with a critical eye because there is a lot you can learn. But I think unthinking valorization or saying, "Oh, the old masters, they knew what they were doing," is unhelpful at best.
Shall we all just laugh and laugh for a moment?
Yeah. Oh, Howard Phillip, just fuck off.
God,
Anyway,
he was a scared fellow, wasn't he?
Providence, Rhode Island's number one Celine Dion impersonator. You'll never unsee that now. I'm sorry. Hey, Howard, why the long face? Oh, that's why. Okay.
Yeah. Yep. He's what a dickhead.
Yeah, that's getting clipped.
No, you can clip me on that one. Howard Philip Lovecraft, dickhead.
There it is.
Happy to be on record with that.
Likewise. So anyway, after all of that, let's take some questions from the floor.
Oh, yes.
Yes. First off, we have Alex Jack Ghostling, who I believe did our excellent opening fan art this week. The name is very similar. Who wanted to know, what's your go-to writing setup? Laptop, notebook and pen, quill and parchment, cup of tea, sick jams, comfy blanket.
So, back in precedented times, my go-to writing setup was one of two things. It was either the notebooks, the Notepad app in a small window at my day job that could be very quickly copy-pasted into a Google Drive, or when I had space, it was my tablet and a small USB keyboard that I would set up in a coffee shop or usually in Nero's, actually, because I find they tended to have quite nice armchairs a lot of the time. They generally were given a bit more breadth with having nice furniture. If you wanted my opinion on British high street coffee chains,
From the book one time.
These days, it's a little bit more. It's generally like this chair, my laptop, later at night than I really should have started writing. I like to have a hot beverage, or a Diet Coke or something like that. But fundamentally, I have found that trying to have a specific writing setup has actually stopped me writing more than it has helped me writing, because it gives me reasons to put off actually doing the words. And I find that generally the key to me writing is to be in a place with a word processor of some sort and just starting actually typing. And once I'm underway, like if I'm a bit chilly, I'll get a blanket, or maybe I'll take a few minutes to get a coffee. But it's just that getting started. I try to have as few impediments or steps to just starting the words as possible.
Music? Yes? No?
Music. Any choices? And do you have anything on in the background, or do you work in silence?
Ooh, depends really. Music, I tends to be a sign that I'm struggling a bit.
Interesting.
If I'm working with an idea or on an episode, and I'm kind of having difficulty either concentrating or like getting a grip on the scary of it, I'll generally just search like dark ambient playlist on Spotify, because I know I'll stop hearing it after about 5 minutes.
Yeah, I get that.
And it's just that atmosphere. Sometimes if I am writing an episode with rain in it, or if I'm writing a scene with rain in it, I do like to put some rain on in the background, because I find that puts my mind in the right space. What's weird is that like I often find temperature will bleed into my writing quite a lot. Like if it is high summer and I am very warm, you can absolutely bet that I will be writing vivid descriptions of like still stagnant air. And if it's chilly, then this story's definitely getting set deep in January. And like the chill wind is biting as you go out the door.
That's brilliant.
It's yeah.
I love that. So stepping across to our next question, this is from Specky Ferret. What was the main inspiration for 13?
That feels like a tricky one to answer, because the core seed of it, the actual idea for the building itself, was given to me, and then I further workshopped it with Rachel, my brilliant editor. So in many ways, it was I would say it was engineered rather than inspired.
Understood.
But at the same time, it is a work that is so close to me and how I have interacted both with the city of London and with housing, and with like it works. It is very much centered around things that are important to me and that have affected my life to one way or another in quite sort of quite profound ways, I guess, because like your home is such an important space emotionally.
Oh God, yeah.
So like, yeah, I feel like it's not something that was in its essence inspired. At its core, it was engineered, but every aspect of it that I came to actually write, I very much felt these parts of myself sort of bleeding into, I
So
guess.
it's very much the classic creative process. As time goes by, more and more of you goes into it. Yeah, I see that. I see that. And you should know that someone in the chat about half an hour ago said, when this first came up, said, "My God, there is no one on earth better equipped to write that premise than you." And I mean, they're not wrong, mate. Let's be honest.
Well, I've never actually lived higher than a second floor. That's I've but yeah, it did feel like when Rachel was like, "Hey, do you think this is something you can write?" It did feel like, well, of course I can. You've literally made this for me, which I don't think they actually did, but it very much felt like that.
It basically did.
Yeah. So next question we have is from RE24601. I love to write myself, but I find it very hard not to lose interest in a long project soon after I start, even if I'm really into it. That said, my question is about consistency. What helps in keeping you focused on a project and getting it to completion?
I mean, well, the practical answer is deadlines. Because having that, it's one I've said it a few times, specifically about the Magnus archives, that I set myself an incredibly grueling rolling schedule because I knew that constant rolling deadlines were one of the few things that could make me work consistently. 30 stories, I was left much more to my own recognizance in terms of actually getting it written, which had a few hairy moments, but I think by the end I did manage to get into a good rhythm. But yeah, there was always that external, it needs to be finished by this date to keep me pushing forward. It's a much harder question when you are writing something that is at the current stage just for you, and that you don't necessarily know if it's going to go anywhere, and you don't necessarily know, and if it is, you don't know when. I think, I'm just trying to think how motivation is hard, and also real talk. The last 9 months, motivation is a lot harder as well.
Well, so, there is that.
I certainly wouldn't beat yourself up about it. I also find I have a thing where unless I have an external pressure and external deadline, I tend to have a month where I am obsessed with a thing, and then I will sort of just start to slide off it and drift away. I think I've found I can beat that with trying to build it into a proper habit, but it's still the case that I find I need to just pour as much effort into it as I can during the window of fascination, and then and to be fair, even with writing something like 13 stories, it was very much okay, I'm in a space where I'm fascinated by this novel right now. Let's get it all out, and then that fascination will fade, and it'll become a bit more drudge work for a few months, and then the inspiration will return. And weirdly, I don't necessarily think that the stuff that's written when I feel inspired and motivated is necessarily actually better than the stuff that is just sort of mined out sentence by sentence. I wish I had a better answer than
No, that's really valid,
just keep going and try to ride the waves of interest. I think, I'll be honest, I think one thing that is potentially useful is if you find that you have a specific limited window, start with something that you can complete within that window.
That's a really good point.
If you're well, I can work on something intensely for a week, write some short stories with it, take a week, write a short story, and sort of see if you can do something, because completing stuff if you don't complete something, it feels like you're never going to be able to complete something. and then when you complete something, you're like, oh, I did this, and like this is also been gradually the arc of, and to be fair, it's still kind of my arc because like 13 stories, because it's of its semi-anthology nature, like there's still a part of me that's like, well, you've never actually like completed a proper novel.
Oh, you have that asshole
so maybe
in
you
your
can't
head
do
as
it.
well. Yeah, fuck that guy.
But do you ever struggle with that thing where it's like, okay, but now I've finished a thing and it's going to be judged. Now that it's done, it's like, okay, I have to put it out into the world. People will comment on it, as opposed to if I just put this forever in the background.
I mean, I have I feel that within me there is both the feeling of like, oh, I don't want to. I'm worried about putting this out in the world because everyone's going to judge it, and like, what if it's actually shit and no one's actually told me? And then on the other hand, there's the, oh great, I'm done, brilliant, off it goes, do what you want with it, just get it as editing. No, I don't want to. I've written it once. So there are these two competing urges, and generally the great, I'm done, email it off, whew, out it goes, wins out.
Tea break. Good. You guys both should have a sip of water if you haven't recently.
Our chat is unusually good at self-care. Do hydrate.
I've actually finished my tea, but I might I will hydrate as soon as I am, because also I've kind of imprisoned myself in wires. You can't see most of them, but yeah, I'm very much like in a comfortable chair, entombed in cables.
Which should be the title of your writing how-to book.
Entombed in cables. I like it. Nice.
But no, I'm right there with you on both those. I mean, the Black Archive book that I just finished, I felt joyous as I pushed it down the ramp and off to my editor, who's going to do the academic bibliography, whereas the stuff I sent him was basically just me going, I've read stuff. Here it is.
Yeah.
And likewise, the novel that's going out to agents next year, part of me is just like, no, I just need to fix this for the next 10 to 15 years, and it'll be fine. It really will. And then when it's nice and shiny and we're all wearing silver foil underwear and eating food pills, then its time will really have come. So
I've found, like, I feel like over the 5 years of writing the Magnus Archives, the perfectionist bit of me, I've managed to, like, kill pretty dead. Just because, like, there's only so precious you can be about an individual episode when like everything's churning at such a schedule. Also, it's working with like the publishing industry, capital P, capital I, is so weird after coming from like sort of indie podcasting, where everything's like, oh, can you get this written and recorded by tomorrow? Brilliant. And you're like, yeah, no problem. And it's like, and then it's just like, well, obviously it's going to be a few months before we know one way or the other. And it's like, oh, we'll need this many words, and that's a lot of words. It's like, yeah, but you got a year. It's like, oh, okay. It's a weird gear shift.
So you like I have that weird feral thing of, I can do this for you now. I don't have to sleep. No, it's fine. Take the 6 months.
Yeah, like what? It just there's just the instincts of like that sort of DIY. Well, no, we need to fix it now. Of like the indie podcasting space is yeah, it sticks with you.
Punk as fuck, but tired is basically it.
Yeah. That's the one. That's the one.
Oh.
Gender number 9 now.
Oh. That felt cathartic to say out loud. Another question. We have a question from Waterdrop01. Do you have advice for young writers attempting horror?
Yes. I would say, like, I mean, do it. Like, write it. Read a lot of horror. Also listen to a lot of horror. And that's not just me plugging my podcast. I think that horror as a genre is a lot more rhythmical, both in terms of actual language and in terms of structure, than a lot of other genres. It's something I say a lot, but I feel like horror is quite close to music in a lot of ways.
Oh, absolutely. It is.
And it's dive into the genre as deep as you can. Like, obviously, be safe. There's a lot of pretty unpleasant stuff out there, but like, test your limits, learn your limits, dive in, and absorb as much as you can. Discard what you don't like, keep what you do. Figure out what scares you, and like, it sounds weirdly shitty to say, but like, don't be in a rush to put your stuff out publicly. I think horror, especially as a genre, is one that is worth taking some time to really practice, learn what you're doing, imitate. Like, the number of like, as a teenager, the number of sort of short horror stories on my like, on old laptops that never saw the light of day because, like, they were straight up like rip-offs of, like, he's just read The Signalman and now he's writing that, or like, he's read his first Clive Barker and you can tell.
It's all blood and carpets,
and like, and so, like, I think there's such a rush and such a pressure, I think, in a lot of culture at the moment to, like, create, get it out now, push out. And it's like, I think I don't think it's necessarily the best move for a lot of young creatives to put stuff out, like, as soon as they possibly can, and especially in a genre like horror, which has a lot of, which is, it can be very difficult, and it can evoke very strong reactions in people, because in many ways you want to evoke strong reactions from people, but it can be a tricky one to navigate when you're young. So, like, read, especially experience, like, write, practice, and like, like, I'd get some friends together in a, like, honestly, like, growing up, it's very important to have your work read, but often, like, the public of the entirety of the internet isn't actually who you want to be reading and feeding back on your stories. Like, finding friends, finding like-minded writers, and working with them and practicing, and just also find collaborators, you know? Like, I don't think any of my stuff I've done entirely alone. You know, all of my projects have had, like, Magnus has Alex, 13 Stories has Rachel, all, like, Mechanisms had about half a dozen. So, like, I think it's also important to find your collaborators, find people you can work with and learn from, and teach each other.
Definitely. Han, you had a point.
I was just going to say, especially, and this is more from the publishing side of things, or the short fiction publishing side of things, especially in an era where anything you ever make available publicly will never go away, it can behoove you to take your time with this, like,
I feel truly blessed to have been maybe a member of the last generation who has been able to delete the shitty internet teenage, their shitty internet teenage self. You know, because, like, I you're gonna want to, you know, you want, like, you're going to want to delete everything you have written. Well, I mean, to be fair, it's a kind of a rolling thing. I think that, like, I'd say 5 to 7 years after you write something, you'll want to get rid of it. But yeah, keep it so that when you are big, people can publish a volume of Juvenalia and then future critics can flick through and be like, oh, he was garbage. Gee.
So is that your next?
What a derivative tea.
We have a question from Wendell's 1967. What was your experience of the editing process, and how different was it from the process of polishing your writing for other media? Was the balance of control different? Did the edit stages change the story to any great degree?
To a degree, I have always found that good editing is good editing and bad editing is bad editing, almost regardless of the medium. And I've been, broadly speaking, blessed to have just brilliant editors. Alex is a brilliant editor and Rachel's a brilliant editor. I think the thing that struck that on a story level, it was very similar. I think story editing is kind of story editing regardless of what medium you're editing for. There was the meetings I'd had with Rachel where we talk through the different chapters, and I'd pitch my grand story structure, and she'd be like, well, this bit doesn't necessarily quite work. Felt remarkably similar to the meetings with Alex, where I'd be pitching the shape of a season, and he'd say, well, there's a 4 episode stretch here where nothing's really happening. What do we want to do with that? Mm-hmm. I think the biggest difference was copy editing was copy editing rather than nudging. Generally with Alex, he'd tweak a lot of the dialogue, but generally the statements, it would be he'd highlight a bit and be like, I think this needs polishing. Whereas in proper publishing TM, it generally it came back with sort of marked changes and this is what I'm going, it would be much more you'd go back and forth suggesting a sentence in a difficult paragraph. Yeah. You'd send off a draft, it would come back and a sentence would be changed with some reasoning. I'd change it a bit more, put my reasoning, sent it off, and and sometimes in a later edit, that whole section would be cut because you're working on a whole text. You can have massive story edits after you've had some very fine line edits, and I think that the main difference was that feeling of polishing specific things until they shone, rather than hammering stuff into a form that could be shipped out.
Yeah, I
because it's that time, and it's that being able to work on the whole instead of piecemeal.
Cool. We have a question from Compost which actually kind of speaks to that. You've talked in the past about how the Magnus Archives is very married to podcasting as a medium and is written to lean into the strengths of that medium. Is 13 Stories similarly married to the written word, or is it perhaps a little more flexible?
So 13 Stories is chiefly the written word. It was written with the audiobook in mind, because clients specifically requested. And incidentally, the audiobook is definitely worth getting because we've got a full cast for it.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it's a full cast audiobook. Each chapter read by a different voice actor, and the final chapter is done much more sort of dialogue heavy. I play Tobias Fell. And the cast is really good. So if you, it's one of those things where I'm if you've enjoyed the book, actually do get the audiobook as well, because it's got some, it's real good. And also, to be honest, I'm very much a read out loud as I'm writing writer. I think a lot of it, I think, is just habit from writing words to be read so often. But also, I'm very much I'm not a speed reader. I'm very much a say the words in my head reader. and I think that comes out of my writing as well, because I will often prioritize rhythm, potentially over sense sometimes. But I do think 13 Stories is I've tried to lean much more into the book, into like the written word as format, and like there are a few where I've tried to play around a bit, because I love books like Dracula or Moby Dick or like Ulysses, where like and all of those are, I'm not actually necessarily recommending you read any of those, but I love books that mess with format, that like experiment with different ways to communicate information in this written form. And so like I've certainly tried to engage with the form of the text in a way that I did with in a similar way to I did with Magnus.
Cool. That yeah, we were wondering whether, just to wrap up, whether you'd like to maybe read the prologue.
Sure. Oh, yes. He said.
If you can have it to hand,
Not
if
having
possible.
a copy to hand, I can hold on. Let me just. Sorry. What I'm going to have to do is, I can't promise this will be the exact prologue that is actually in the book. I can certainly find
A draft of the prologue.
I can certainly find a draft of the prologue to read. He said, being unable to find a draft of the prologue to read.
While you were looking for a draft of the prologue to read, one last question: what's
yes,
next?
Please.
What's next? What are you
Sorry.
on? What's next?
So you broke. Oh, what's next? Is second book. Currently hammering out the first draft. I don't know offhand how much I'm allowed to say. It's
Is it a sequel?
Not. No, it's not a direct sequel. Though, if you, the protagonists of the second book are mentioned, I believe, offhand in a single line of 13 Stories.
Oh.
So it's very like it's same world. It's the same world in the sense that it is the real world, but a bit spooky.
The Jonathan Sims literary universe is born. Yes.
It's like the real world, but a little bit spooky. Okay. Yes, I found a draft of the prologue.
Fantastic.
There's a couple of words that are redacted, so I'm going to have to just go boop.
That's fine.
Myself when reading them. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. It's been an absolute joy to talk to you as always.
Thank you for coming on, dude. This has been great.
Excellent. Right.
Wishing you had that.
Right. Prologue. Legacy of a butchered billionaire. The life and dismemberment of Tobias Fell. David Erickson, crime writer, crime editor. 5 years on, it's an all too familiar cliche that the only thing more interesting than the life of Tobias Fell was his death. For most of his eventful career, he was lauded by the public as an entrepreneurial titan. It's no secret he remains the Sunday Beep's most interviewed non-political figure, and we certainly weren't alone in that regard, with his picture gracing the Beep Business Post no less than 14 times since 1992. After his death, this fascination has only increased, though it has now taken on a wholly different character. Even for those who don't follow such things, it's been hard to escape the relentless tide of true crime investigations, conspiracy theories, even discussions on paranormal forums. The brutal slaying has found its way to the top of more than one online list of creepiest unsolved murders. Alive or dead, No one ever seems to tire of talking about Tobias Fell. But there are those that never stopped digging, who never accepted the impossible facts of this baffling case. So is it time those facts were re-examined? His origins were similar to any other billionaire. He was provided with a small fortune by his father and proceeded through luck, skill, and, many say, ruthlessness, to turn it into a large fortune. It has been noted by many that, even by the standards of his peers, young Tobias seemed utterly unconcerned with the ethical implications of his business practices. While many of his more public and well-profiled enterprises, including those covered in this very publication, were PR-friendly tech companies or well-beloved brands, it takes very little digging to notice his most profitable investments came from less cuddly sources: pharmaceutical companies, gemstone mining, environmentally devastating oil extraction, and arms manufacture. There were accusations his companies were involved in sweatshops, land seizure, and slave labor, with many progressives coming forward with their condemnations of him even while he was still alive. None of these accusations, however, ever seemed to touch Tobias Fell. A ready wit and an instinct for keeping his distance from the less savoury aspects of his business served to keep his image clean, and well-publicised charitable initiatives ensured nobody raised too much interest in his tax dealings, even if many of these philanthropic projects seemed to quietly disappear when the spotlight faded. Every eager would-be tycoon named him their inspiration as he topped rich list after rich list. There were plenty of reports, of course. Human rights organizations condemned his company's ethics, but his books on business advice, reputedly ghostwritten, made for far easier reading. Indeed, looking through the archives of the Sunday Boop, it's hard not to see our own complicity in burying many of these stories in the back pages. When Tobias began to retreat from the public eye in the years leading up to his death, this seemed only to cement his reputation. For every concerned activist railing against his businesses, there were a dozen admirers intrigued by this new mystique and the occasional long-lens paparazzi photograph of the now reclusive billionaire. He gradually stepped back from running his companies, and his much-lauded philanthropy entirely dried up. It seemed the business world's golden boy wished to simply spend his time hiding away in the penthouse suite of Banyan Court, a building he commissioned. It is often said that Banyan Court stood as a monument to everything Tobias Fell was, both to those who held him as their idol and to those who hated him. A towering 13-storey residential development in the heart of Tower Hamlets, one of the poorest areas of central London. The building burst from the old brick shell of a Victorian factory-turned-tenement and blossomed into a grand edifice of glass and steel, a love letter to tasteful opulence. Our own coverage of the construction, Billionaire Makeover for London's Poorest, 3rd July 2007, talked of regeneration and of the project enriching the area. But critics saw only gentrification and the displacement of families, predictions which have largely been proved accurate. One particular point of contention was the part of Banyan Court given over to affordable housing. Local planning guidelines require new residential developments to set aside a portion of their spaces available to low-income occupiers, but alleged indifference by the government and enforcement agencies led to persistent rumours about the construction quality of some areas of the building. New residents of these affordable homes reported cut corners, shoddy materials, and fire hazards. The flats at the back were apparently almost completely segregated from the glistening modern facilities of the main building, and within a year, left-wing blogs began to talk about the hidden slum lurking behind the shining facade of Banyan Court. And sat in his pristine penthouse at the top of it all, Tobias Fell. But however fascinating his life may have been, his death is what most people remember him for. It has gone down as one of the most high-profile unsolved murders in history. The details that were released to the public, and many details that weren't, have been relentlessly dissected by the media and amateur detectives, and almost no aspect of it makes sense. The sheer brutality of the killing was breathtaking, and yet despite the fact that the murder must have taken place inside his penthouse, none of the blood found at the scene belonged to Tobias Fell. In fact, according to certain leaked case files, no positive identification was ever made. The billionaire was listed as the only victim, so why were there multiple reports from people who saw additional body bags being removed by the emergency services? Further igniting the imagination of conspiracy theorists were the matter of the witnesses. Tobias Fell wasn't alone when he was killed. There were 13 other people with him, all of whom claimed to have been attending a dinner party at his unexpected invitation. Though not all lived in the building, all these guests had some sort of connection to Banyan Court. Aside from a postcode, however, it seems they had nothing whatsoever in common. An avant-garde art dealer, a local plumber, a 6-year-old child attending with her mother. Few, if any, of the guests would be those expected at a billionaire's banquet. Even beyond that, each guest said the same thing. They had never met Tobias Fell before that night. They had received an invitation without any sort of warning, and, despite forensic evidence conclusively showing he must have been killed while they were there, none of them had any idea when or how their host had been murdered. Despite this seemingly obvious pool of suspects, no arrests were ever made by the Metropolitan Police, and no official explanation of the killing was ever given. In the 5 years since the crime, none of the police or medical professionals who were part of the initial call on subsequent investigation have made any comment on the record. Further fueling speculation of conspiracy were the strange events that occurred in and around Banyan Court in the week leading up to Tobias Fell's murder. The deaths of Edith Kinney and James Andre, each officially labelled a suicide, as well as the disappearance of noted activist Diego Santi, who was last seen entering the building. Theorists have never found a satisfying explanation for any of them. Now, after half a decade, Banyan Court is all but abandoned. As leases end, estate agents have been unable to find replacements, with other residents and landlords abruptly selling or, in some cases, simply disappearing. The once impressive building now stands silent, casting a lonely eye over the dilapidated buildings below. A 13-story tombstone to a man whose shadow still falls as darkly as that of his creation. The murder of Tobias Fell remains unsolved, and it is unlikely it will ever be known what actually happened that night, or what those 13 ill-fated guests truly saw.
It's all that good. All of it. Thank you so much for coming on, buddy. We really appreciate it.
No problem, mate. Like, it's really nice.
I absolutely
really enjoyed
love
it.
how you start off with this very news reporter presentation. The boops were my personal favorite. And then, of course, you get to the end and you just can't help but slow down and chew on the lovely, lovely language.
Yeah, well, you know, it's you got to end with something chewy.
Cool.
Just before we send you on your way with huge thanks, we're overdue the curtain call for Mr. Chungus. Wendy has excelled herself this week.
Did you explain to Johnny what Chungus is?
I have explained to Johnny that Chungus is our sourdough starter. I have explained
it is a cosplaying sourdough starter.
It is a cosplaying sourdough starter. I didn't get the chance to explain that Chungus has a fictional boyfriend from A Wizard's Guide to Defensive Baking, the Ursula Vernon's book we just finished.
Okay, no, that makes sense.
Yeah, you know.
That makes sense.
Their ship name is Bungus.
But this is Chungus, dressed as Peter Lucas.
Including in a Knives Out jumper, which I thought was a particularly amazing.
Which is just my only...
I mean, it's got like split tail coats and buttons and the whole 9 yards. I'm just ridiculously impressed.
I mean, my only conclusion is Wendy is some kind of crochet sorceress at this point. It's really the only thing that makes sense.
This is her like lockdown
I do not know what to feel about this other than a sort of awed appreciation and an intimidation, I think. Like, yeah, that's astounding.
Yeah, we introduced Chungus to their godmother, Ursula Vernon. We've just finished serializing her book called A Wizard's Guide to Defensive Baking, which involves a feral sourdough starter magical familiar, which is where the inspiration kind of came from. And we've decided that Ursula gets to be the godparent, the deity parent of Chungus. So now his moral upbringing is her responsibility.
Which
is going to be hilarious.
That's fantastic. I also like it's fascinating seeing, because like it's fascinating seeing what images become kind of ingrained in the mind of the fandom, because like I'll be honest, when I was writing Peter Lucas, like Misty Captain Birdseye was not like like I mean I didn't really have a solid image, but
Did you have
it's
a
very much now
voice perhaps in mind, Johnny? I mean, Alistair's certainly been having fun playing around with voices. I love that the two of you are both laughing too hard at the concept to actually go through with this. I am going to go. Yes.
So, 13 Stories is released tomorrow. No. Nice try. Thank you so much for coming on, dude. This has been amazing.
No worries. It's been an absolute joy.
And keep writing things, because you write things that are good.
I will do my best.
Your best is absolute. Go ahead.
Oh, thank you. One thing to mention is currently 13 Stories is UK is being published only in the UK. I think there will be a US date, but it's probably not going to be for a while. So US viewers who are very keen to get it, there are I'm trying to think offhand. There are quite a lot of UK bookstores that do deliver internationally. Waterstones and Foyles, Blackwell's, also Goldsboro Books, and I think Queen's Park Books also have a few by me still.
We are seeing a few people in the chat who say they have successfully ordered it in the US and are getting US release dates tomorrow.
I've seen a few US folks who pre-ordered it. I think mostly from Waterstones. It's arrived already, so it is. I mean, shipping's not exactly cheap, but it is importable. So I do apologize to any US fans who are looking for a copy, because it's I know it's
out of
a bit of a headache.
Have you been hit by the same thing we have, which is the Obama effect?
I'm not entirely sure, to be honest, because like this, one of the weird things about like shifting over to like publishing industry TM is that like a lot of stuff that I'm used to like knowing a lot about, or like how it goes out, or like all this sort of stuff. Either people are like, oh no, don't worry, we've got a department, they're taking care of that, you don't need to worry about it, and I'm like, cool.
Okay.
Or it's like things like international rights. I don't actually know. Fundamentally, it's like they. I am told when there is news. We've recently had signed with, I think it's ECMO. A Russian publishing house who are going to be doing a Russian translation, which is really lovely. And so, like, when stuff like that, so like, I am certain I will be told as and when US stuff as like when there is stuff to know about the US side of things, but in terms of the why or the aspect of that, in terms of I don't really know, I'm afraid.
Explain the Obama effect.
Really quick, the Obama effect was this kind of glorious backwash of consequence when Obama handed in a 800,000 word book?
I don't know.
Or something ridiculous.
His latest book.
It's massive, and it's incredibly popular. Like entire container ships of it
right.
the Atlantic, and it also meant that basically every press in Europe was printing this. So when there's a lot, it's a big book, and there's a lot of it.
So the Escape Pod anthology was delayed. Your book was delayed. Lots of books were delayed, and now we have this legitimate "Thanks, Obama." It's your fault.
Which is just like it's an extra special bonus meme, you know. I'm really taken with it.
We'll just have to.
I think I don't believe it's so with the US side. It's not as far as I'm aware. It's not a delay. It is that it's to do with how different countries' publishing houses negotiate and sell with each other. I believe the situation is currently it does not have a publisher in the US.
Okay.
And so which means that Glance will likely if it doesn't get one, it means Glance will probably eventually put it out themselves in the US, but it's much better for them, and I think for me if it is an actual US publisher. It's one of these I don't know. Publishing. It's apparently complicated. Which as I say that that's not me being snarky. That's me not understanding the intricacies of it. But the upshot is, it will be available in the US at some point. Brilliant. I have no idea when that point will be.
One last thing, and then thank you so much for sticking around much longer than we asked you to. I really appreciate it. Is the audiobook arriving tomorrow as well? Do you know or not?
It is in the UK at least.
Yes, the audiobook. The audiobook should be available from UK Audible. I think it's going out on a few other platforms. I think people have had luck finding it on the Australian Audible as well. I don't know what the situation is in terms of changing and obviously I would never advocate lying to Audible about where you are. Obviously that's
not on streaming.
That'd be dreadful.
Wrong is bad.
But yes, absolutely. It's certainly dropping on UK Audible tomorrow, and hopefully a few other platforms.
Brilliant. I think that's it. Thank you so much, Johnny. This has been amazing. We will let you go and wend your merry way, folks.
Untangle yourself.
Yeah, from your cage of wire.
Yes, just sort of carve my way out of my.
You just need the Indiana Jones hat and a machete now, right? Exactly.
Folks, do please stick around. We'll be back in a few minutes with some shenanigans and other things. hello again. Please pay all the attention to Marguerite, who's just tweaking a thing in the background.
Yeah, keep talking. You're fine.
I'm just seeing are there enough of us to fund a full Peter Lucas costume for Alistair? And I'm just going to let that develop. Massive thanks to Johnny. That was huge fun. And also huge thanks to Alex Jack Duffy, whose pair of Peter Lucas images was the fan art that opened the show this week. As is always the case, we will have a whole bunch of follow-up links for you, including Johnny's RPG company, MacGuffin & Co., where you can find him online, buy links for the book, a couple of movies which are complementary to the book, that kind of thing. In a sense, I do cosplay as myself, yes.
Test 1, 2. Hi, everybody. Marguerite here. I'm just checking out if you all can hear me. It looks like I might be kind of loud. So I'm going to come adjust that real quick.
Okay.
And see if I will not overpower you now.
There we
How's
go.
that?
All
Does that
right.
look a little better?
So, also, good grief, Wendy. Good grief. This is magic. This is actual legit wizardry
It's
right here.
Chungus magic.
It's
He looks
so cool.
good.
Speaking of magic, we have committed retail. This is our level of commitment to the bit. Because some of you may not know this, but across the course of December, we're going to be doing a Christmas Carol. All of it. Content warning. Accents.
I have to make cue cards. There's going to be so many accents.
And we were...
Oh, hold on, Hans. Folks are asking you if you could please explain Chungus.
Yes, of course.
And show him off again.
Okay. For those of you who are newcomers, Chungus, as you can probably see, is a sourdough starter. He's our sourdough starter, and he was born on the 20th of June, around the time that everybody decided now was a good time to start making sourdough. And, I mean, his name and an awful lot of the attention we pay to him really comes from the fact that we're both fundamentally goofy people who like to riff on stuff. And when that hits the chat, things happen. Chungus's two greatest achievements to date are that Chungus has a boyfriend in Bob, the sourdough starter from T. Kingfisher, also known as Ursula Vernon's superb A Wizard's Guide to Defensive Baking. And this is Bob. This is Bob's bucket, which Wendy crocheted for us. And also that Chungus has costumes. Yes, I'm adjusting him. See, Chungus has costumes, and these include there's a wizard's outfit, there's a vampire outfit, that kind of thing. We have made much bread with Chungus. We make bread with Chungus about once a week, and it is ridiculously good. Seriously, it's the best sourdough bread I've ever had. So we have our yeasty child here, who is frequently better dressed than me.
Chungus of Christmas Future!
Chungus of...
Oh my gosh, the
Please
idea
do that.
of Chungus having
Please do that.
costumes for each of the ghosts from
Many
A
breads
Christmas
have been
Carol.
made with the Chunky Boy.
Oh, Chungus of Christmas Future.
Yes.
Chungus of Christmas Past.
So yes, Chungus is fundamentally a bucket of yeast, but he's our bucket of yeast, and we do love him. And so did you, because you keep making him buckets and costumes and stuff, and it's great. So yeah, that's Chungus, and like I said, he does need a little sleep hat. You are absolutely right. Wendy, I can hear your knuckles cracking. Ooh, Bob needs an Elias costume. Oh, I like that.
Hang on a second, because Wendy did a bonfire night hat for Chungus. Hang on, let me take it out.
We have a suggestion for Bob of Christmas Past, Chungus of
This
Christmas
is
Present,
Chungus's wardrobe.
Crookie of Christmas
He's
Future.
got his own little thing.
That's my favorite sticker.
Just... No, fuck you. Statement begins.
I tried
know,
to
I
get
know.
him to do a Peter impersonation, but this was one of the hats she made. See, what I really like about this is if I got a fascinator that was just like the size of his jar, I could wear it on my head. Okay, I
could steal Chungus's wardrobe. We've gone on a complete tangent here.
We have.
We're talking about A Christmas Carol.
We have. Okay, so December, we're doing a Christmas Carol. Content warning, accents. I cannot emphasize this enough. And we were shopping over the weekend, and we have this tradition where we buy a big piece of Lego that we make on New Year's Day. And normally it's one of the big kind of residential things. You know, we have the diner with the boxing gym and the podcast studio above it. We have the bank, which is home to constant leverage heists, all this kind of thing. And this year it's going to be the Sesame Street set, because there is now such a thing as a Cookie Monster minifigure, and I need that in my life. And we happened to notice that once you spent above a certain level, you got a freebie. And the amount we needed to get to that level was an Iron Man set I've always wanted. So we ordered that.
Oops, Lego happened.
And then this happened.
Oops, Lego happened.
Yes, this is A Christmas Carol Lego. Yes, that is a Tiny Tim minifigure. Yes, he is more pallid than the other minifigures. Look at evil Scrooge. Look at his evil Victorianness. Look at him. So this will be getting made. It may
We'll
possibly...
put some pictures in the stream notes, folks. Don't worry.
Yeah, it may be getting made in the stream. We haven't discussed that yet, but it's an outside possibility. And this will be window dressing for next...
Tiny Tim.
Yes! For the stream next month. So there's that, and yeah, we just had Johnny on and it went really well. That was fun. I like doing these. I like doing these a lot. And...
You know what else we like doing?
Oh, yes. It is, in fact, about that time. We're now officially on the Shenanigans. We need chat's help with something. You know those corporate one-a-day calendars? You know, the kind of word a day, ology a day kind of things. Ozzy, how many streams will be Christmas Carol?
It
We're thinking
will be the 5 weeks of December, because there are 5, I believe they're referred to as staves of
Yes.
A Christmas Carol. So for the 5 weeks of December, we will be doing A Christmas Carol. So that's starting next Wednesday. Folks, there will be new stream overlays. There will be new loyalty icons. There may even be new emojis. I kind of went all out because
Jeez.
Etsy sells icon sets. It's going to
Yeah.
be really cute.
Marguerite went on a festive rampage. It was kind of amazing. Yeah, those one-word-a-day calendars. We kind of need your help in finding a really good one. And by really good one, I mean a really awful one. You know, that kind of, take a swim in Lake You. Embrace the synergy of self. Type bullshit nonsense aphorisms.
Basically, if you can help us find a one-a-day calendar that a really annoying boss might have, you know, say the temporary leader of an institute
Martin,
might read
I have a new page on my calendar. I want to read it to you.
daily
That kind of thing.
to his poor, beleaguered employees. That's what we're looking
Possibly
for.
over the PA. Martin, is this thing on? I can't hear. Oh, it is. Never mind. Mondays, am I right? Exactly.
So please send us your suggestions. We've got a couple weeks.
So we have 3 short pieces of shenanigans for you this week. And I am attempting to open the first one now. Here we go. This is from Rachel's digital canvas and is called Rewriting Icarus.
Hold on just a second. We should probably warn folks. This is a piece of poetry that Alistair found on somebody reading on TikTok.
Jax recommended it to me.
Oh, okay, great, cool. Oh, he was quite taken by it.
Here is what they don't tell you. Icarus laughed as he fell, threw his head back, and yelled into the winds, arms spread wide, teeth bared to the world. There is a bitter triumph in crashing when you should be soaring. The wax scorched his skin, ran blazing trails down his back, his thighs, his ankles, his feet. Feathers floated like prayers past his fingers, close enough to snatch back. Death breathed burning kisses against his shoulders where the wings joined the harness. The sun painted everything in shades of gold. There's a certain beauty in setting the world on fire and watching from the center of the flames. And there's some really good notes about this as well.
I really like that. That's really pretty.
There's actually a really detailed little kind of micro essay about it after that, which I'm an absolute mark for, so I love that.
Well, I'm also playing Hades right now, so I'm now like, Zagreus running into Icarus.
Has Thanatos shown up again and draped himself over stuff yet?
Who?
Thanatos?
You mean my boyfriend?
Your boyfriend?
Yes.
Yes,
Zagreus' boyfriend? Yes. Yes.
I apologize in advance for what's about to happen. That's really all I can say. Incorrect, the Magnus Archives, number 126. Musical episode. Elias and Peter's romantic duet. Peter, singing. He clings, he's needy, he's also really greedy. Elias, his eyes are beady. Peter, this is my verse, hello? See, Dapper, that little... oh no, that's what I live for.
I do love seeing the chat go, oh boy, oh no. It just makes me so happy.
And finally, for today, we have from @Void, which is just, I mean, if you're going to have a Tumblr, have it called something like that. Shipping Lonely Eyes. A play in 5 acts. 1, lol, what? Oh god, it kind of works. This is hilarious, I love it. 2, wow, on re-listen, they really are like that, huh? Best crack ship ever. I will never stop joking about this. I don't ship it for real, but oh my god, I love it so much. 3, oh, they definitely got divorced right after Elias hung a copy of the infamous Guardian article in his office. 4, and I love that time they got divorced over the holiday party incident. Classic. 5, what? Since when has that not been canon? I could have swore... well, I guess I ship it. How did that happen?
It's such a perfect summation of the entire Lonely Eyes phenomenon. It's so well done.
It really is, isn't it? That's pretty much our show, folks. And that's pretty action-packed, I think. Don't you?
Oh, you should probably also mention that you're an Audioverse finalist and that voting is open.
I'm an Audioverse finalist for my work on the Magnus Archives as Peter Lucas. And voting is open through to the 5th of December. We will put a link in the chat, hopefully. Do we have a link? We have a link.
Bam,
I will put a link in the show notes. And if you do want to vote, please do. And if you don't, I understand completely. There's actually a bunch of Magnus folks in there as well. Ben and Imogen especially are up for their work on Stella Firma.
I found a link.
Fantastic. Link is in there.
I'm
thank you so much to everybody saying, I voted for you. Thank you.
That's very sweet of everyone. Thank you.
We will be back on Sunday for the first part of The Last Campfire, which is our first new game in a couple of months on the Chill Sunday gaming stream. A game I am reliably informed is full of feelies, so prepare yourself accordingly. And then we'll be back here next Wednesday at 10 o'clock, when after this excellent little 2-week sojourn into the wonderful world of interviewing amazing, creative, lovely people, we will start in on one of the greatest works of English literature of all time, A Christmas Carol by Charles Big Papa Funk Dickens himself.
Did you just...
Yes.
No, but the true question is, we all know you're going to do accents, but the real question is, are you going to try and do the Muppet accents or not?
May have to watch the movie again for research. Yes, let's say research.
But after Turkey Day. Tomorrow
But
is
after Turkey Day.
You can watch The Christmas Carol on traditional Black Friday, should you choose. I will be eating pumpkin pie and baking cornbod. As
Yes, you will. And,
American! As
and
intended.
I will be assisting in, as Ellen, she just said, yeah, Big Papa Funk is what they call Charles Dickens in high school.
Totally. That was absolutely his, football. That was on the back of his Letterman's jacket,
Yes.
right? Exactly.
Yeah, introduce...
Werner Herzog voice as one of the characters.
Oh, I think Herzog might have to be Marley. You are weak, Ebenezer. The sands of time will erode the flesh from your bones,
No.
and the ants will feast upon you.
You must change your... It has to be one of the ghosts. It has to
You
be
must
one of the
change
ghosts.
your ways. Oh, I see. Now I'm going to work out where to put Herzog in. This is a great problem to have.
This is a
Wendy's
fantastic
just
problem for you to have with turkey serotonin over
Oh, Herzog Tiny Tim. God bless us, everyone. What the hell is wrong with him?
Oh no, that's gonna get stuck in my head. See, when we originally just came up with the idea for the Christmas Carol, I was thinking, do I have enough t-shirts and hats and pins and stuff that he could do costume changes? But the very thought of that is exhausting.
I think
What I might do, I might be able to do it with the stream overlay and just have all the different names and then just be frantically hitting buttons all stream long. But that also sounds exhausting.
See, the thing is, I don't do American accents, so
Thank God.
the Muppets is going to be problematic. But I can promise a couple of people will sound kind of like Mark Shepard if you squint.
How many genders are we up to now in the chat?
10. We've had about 10.
I think we've actually reached a dozen at this point.
Thank you, Jax.
All right, so I think that's everything. Please do send us your suggestions for horrible corporate overlord one-a-day affirmation calendars. And, if we can't find a calendar that we like, maybe we'll build one. That might happen. And I'm sure Peter could be inspired to look up a few more extras for special occasions.
Remember, if you're working hard, that means I can't see you.
Peter, that's not even a thing.
I know. 15 fears, 15 genders. There it is. Brilliant.
Oh, well, the chat did decide that the 15th fear is deadlines.
Well, yeah, of course.
Absolutely. Love, laugh, lonely. That's going on a cross stitch.
Oh.
That is so
yes.
going on a cross stitch.
Yes,
Sorry
yes.
if that was loud, everybody, but I'm totally doing it. All right, everybody.
Right, we're going to sign off, folks. Thank you so much.
You can follow us on Twitter after this, and there'll be a full list of stream notes.
Mm-hmm.
Let me just... Ooh, hang on. I'm trying new buttons, and I messed it up. All right. There we go, everybody. Have a good night.
See you on Sunday.